most of you guys know that I love public speaking, and so it's always a lot of fun to get in front of groups and talk about all this fun stuff that we deal with in the insurance and the expert witness arena. But we'll have to deal with this video for today. So let's talk about this case forensics Jensen Hughes thing that's happened over the last few months here. So let's kind of give you guys a bit of context, right? So when Jensen Hughes originally bought Case Forensics, they did not have an existing forensics practice. Jensen Hughes, at the time was a fire protection engineering company. So what does that mean that they do? They get hired by architects and engineers to design and install fire suppression systems inside new buildings and or renovations, including things like the sprinkler system, fire detection devices, alarms, etc. In the design world, there are weeks, months, sometimes years leading up to these projects. So you've got quite a timeline to ensure that you've got all the appropriate internal capacity, resources you're going to need to meet the different project needs and timelines. In forensics, you get a call from an adjuster and attorney an hour ago saying there was just a major fire and they want you out there this afternoon. You've got to drop everything, rush out to the site, jump on an airplane, go wherever you got to go, start doing interviews, start doing site investigation without having the benefit of any research on the building itself, unless you've done a little bit of quick Google searching while you're en route. The business model between those is completely different. Design engineers, typically depending on their level, charge between 65 and 150 bucks an hour. Forensic engineers typically charge 195 to 450 an hour, or higher if you're in a niche specialty like IP infringement, some products or other. Obviously, there's been a huge influx of private equity over the last 15, 20 years, really, especially 15 years into this business. So these private equity guys, these are incredibly smart people that understand how to put deals together. But the primary challenge is really how do you create value within a professional services company? You can squeeze expenses, which many of us have experienced, and you get a little bit more profit margin. Hiring experts to be billable and getting them to 70% billable of their total, which you think about 2,000 hours a year means that's 1,400 hours a year billable. That's how you quickly create value, which is both increased revenue and also net profit. Most professional services firms operate on the 25 to 30% EBITDA, which equates to about 20% in net income. So for the $195 an hour engineer that bills 2,000 hours, that's $390,000 in gross revenue and about $80,000 in net profit. At 54th, if he's only 70% billable, he bills about $273,000 a year, and his net income is about $54,000. So at $54,000, when you factor in his health insurance costs, expenses that don't get reimbursed by the client for internal travel or training or whatever, his share corporate overhead and marketing and whatnot, you can see that he's barely paying for himself. And so that's why that 70% number is so crucial to get folks above that baseline. Let me describe the business model we had at Rimkus for a while during the mold days. So I was a technician that was making $35 an hour, billing 95 bucks an hour, right? So I was making 35 grand a year, billing 95 bucks an hour. We were swamped. So I was billing over 2,000 hours a year. So I was billing $190,000 a year and getting paid $35,000. That's an incredible profit margin. We love that, right? Private equity guys would salivate over that. However, most professional engineering firms really struggle with this idea of letting non-engineers do engineering work. My degrees in business administration and marketing, and my book I talk about. I went out with a structural engineer and environmental engineer on a Monday, was trained on how to do mold investigations, and on Wednesday of that same week, I was training a structural engineer and an environmental engineer to learn what I had just learned how to do 3 days earlier. And so that was the reality back when we were swamped with all that cat work. But professional engineers and the Texas Professional Engineering Board says that engineers can designate what they call a responsible person on their behalf. And so I had engineers that had worked with me, had done investigations with me, and trusted me that I knew what I was doing and what I was looking for and how I did my documentation and ask all the questions and everything, that I could do investigations all by myself and they would stamp and seal my reports without ever having been to the site. However, that model of having a bunch of technicians and then a few engineers that are stamping and sealing and reviewing things is a completely different model than the way that most professional forensics firms are set up these days. The second challenge that the private equity guys have is that in this business, the business really does follow the client relationships. And so you can have all the non-compete agreements in the world, but you're not going to tell AIG that they have to continue calling your firm when the preferred person that they've been using for the last 5 or 10 years just left your firm and went to a competitor. That's, that business is most likely going to go with them. And so now you can sue that prior employee, which we obviously number of us have seen that happen as well, right? Make it very expensive for them to defend themselves. I had to defend one of my employees when I hired him away from my prior firm and brought him over to my new firm. But what you've just done is you've announced very, very publicly to all of your current employees what your retention strategy really is. And so I believe, from a leadership perspective, and the way that we always operated our forensics firms was we want to create an environment where people work on really interesting projects, are intellectually stimulated, and work with really, really good people. And so if I can create that and I pay you well, you will be tickled pink. You'll work for me for the next 15, 20, 30 years, and we will have a fantastic life together, and we'll have a very profitable business, and we'll all sing kumbaya. From a leadership perspective, though, the challenge you have when you go and do some of this M&A work is if I put a bad boss on top of you, right? And we all know that people don't leave bad companies, they leave bad bosses. You, now the engineer or the team lead, you simply take your business and those $400,000 in billings, if it's only you or a small team or more than that, and you simply leave and go to a competitor, and all that revenue just went with you. And so I just eroded my gross revenue and my net profit because now you and that team have left, right? How many times have we seen that in the last decade with these different firms? The only way to build true synergy in forensic engineering firms is, for the example, let's just take two mechanical engineers that both have small teams working under them that come together and say, let's just say 3 to 5 people on each team. So because they're good, they're busy, all 12 of these guys and ladies are billing a combined 90%, or about 21,000 hours a year. So at a blended rate of 225, that total revenue is $4.8 million. You can add a junior engineer, he could be immediately 90% billable, which means everybody else just became 80% billable. And you take the time that you just gave them back, 16 hours a month or so roughly, and they can further develop client relationships. They can go build some new relationships, and or they could put more work into some of their current files. There is a what I call hidden billable profit leakage that exists in the really good forensics firms where folks are just really swamped with work because they're good, right? They're busy. So people are calling them wanting to do work. There is additional time and research effort, and work that they could put into files, but because they're so busy, they're putting forth the minimum required effort for each file, getting it out the door and getting on the next one. And so the loss of those billable hours is something that we never get back. And so we want to be very, very cognizant, and that's why we try to have a really, delicate balance of people at the 70 to 85% billable range with occasional spikes, beyond that, of keeping people in that arena where they could actually devote full energy, time, and effort to each one of their files and make sure that we maximize profit per file. And also, just provide a better work product, right? If you're putting an additional 5 hours worth of work into a file, the client's going to feel that additional 5 hours worth of effort that you put into it and want to call you again and give you more referrals, right? We all know it takes 6 to 18 months to ramp up that junior engineer, get them comfortable with the work, the pace, the communication with the clients, the style of writing, etc. And so you think about those two mechanicals that came together when they look at their client base and they say, our clients are hiring electrical engineers, they're probably hiring plumbers, they're probably hiring structural engineers, they're probably hiring fire people. So we start to add other specialties and we get those same clients comfortable with those particular people. And over the course of, a bit of time, they start getting some of that work as well. And assuming you deliver a high quality product, then they start using you for more of that. And that's how the business grows. It follows good quality work from each of the engineers that get hired by the clients, whether they're adjusters or lawyers, and just continues to grow very organically that way. And so it's a harder thing to engineer, and it's definitely very difficult to do very, very quickly. But at LWG, because we had built a great engine, and I got to credit Bob Weedoff and Don Scaff, because we did a really fantastic job. We grew our revenue over 50% in 5 years. And that was completely organic growth, right? We didn't make a single acquisition, and then we obviously sold to private equity in 2015. But when you do this thing the right way, when you've got really, really good leadership that number one is focused on, number one, we're taking care of our people first in order for them to take really, really good care of our clients. And we want to make sure that everybody really enjoys the work that they're doing every single day. And we create that environment where it's a true team and collaborative environment where everybody really is pulling for their neighbor and they like and know and trust each other. That is a fantastic company to be a part of. And that, frankly, is what every single professional engineer, forensics folks out there is looking for. And unfortunately, when you see people leave some of these firms, they did not feel that at that particular firm. And so, the nice thing about the engineering world right now is there is a huge demand for great engineers. So I'm not worried. Every single person at Jensen Hughes, the former case, is, if they're not already gainfully employed, they will be very shortly, because there is absolute need for really good engineers in the market. And so, hopefully you guys enjoyed this short video and kind of my analysis of what went on there and what it takes to actually build a true high quality forensics firm. And we'll look forward to maybe sharing some additional ideas with you guys in the future.